So-Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SOCALLED for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org.
You can't be what you can't see. And it sounds weird to somebody who's used to seeing themselves represented everywhere. But when you don't see that, it becomes a struggle to convince yourself that you're good enough to do that.
This is Mark Wojcik, and I'm wondering, how's your so-called career? Welcome to So-Called, the podcast that explores the why and how of work. On today's episode, we meet Rebecca De León, marketing professional, entrepreneur, and podcaster. When we met, I asked Rebecca to tell me about her varied roles.
So I have my quote-unquote day job. I am a communications manager for the Planned Parenthood affiliate that covers Idaho and 5 other states. And so that's kind of like my day job. Mm-hmm. I'm also an entrepreneur in that I started my own consulting business on the side. It's called Unheard Consulting. And through that, I provide anything from PR, crisis management, writing, website management for a lot of different agencies. And it's very specific what I offer. It's a little bit different than anything else out there because I focus on the Latino community or the Latinx community. And so I am bilingual in English and Spanish, but I am also very bicultural. And so I will take a marketing strategy and I will apply it to several different cultures, not just translating what you already have into Spanish, because that doesn't always really resonate with the audience. And so that's what I do, off to the side. And then I'm also a podcaster. And I co-created a podcast called the Latino Card with my friends, JJ Saldana, Nicole Foy, and Ash Miller. And we did it in a partnership with the Idaho Press. And we just completed a year. And the idea behind that podcast is that we explore a lot of different issues with a Latino lens. So everything we've talked about from education to health, to immigration, to art. And we bring in a lot of guests who we feel are very impactful to the community, but their stories are not often told in quote unquote mainstream media. And so we just actually won an Idaho Press Club award for that podcast.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, we were really, really, really excited and really surprised, to be honest. But we got first place in general excellence for audio journalism. And so that to me means that we're doing something good. And so those are the 3 things that I've been occupying my time with when I am not busy being a wife and mother to a 2-year-old.
While she has many roles, Rebecca says there's a common thread running throughout all of her work.
If I had to kind of put one umbrella term over everything that I do, I would call myself an advocate. An advocate is just a storyteller. And that's what I do for Planned Parenthood, is essentially what I do even in my own business when I'm creating marketing strategies for organizations that want to reach audiences that they aren't currently reaching, or strengthen what they want to do with the people that they are currently reaching. It's always like, what story are you telling? And I have been able to work with organizations that I believe in, like the ACLU of Idaho, the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence, organizations that I believe in because they have incredible stories to tell, and all I get to do is help them tell those stories. And then with my podcast, that's all I'm doing, is I'm telling other people's stories. And it's something that I absolutely love doing. And ultimately that is kind of like what my own personal mission has been, is to tell the stories that are not being told.
Rebecca's love of storytelling began in college when she discovered journalism, and I asked her to describe how her career evolved over time.
Well, it's interesting because when I first went to college, I had kind of no idea what I wanted to do. I was a math major for a little while. I used to be really good at math, not anymore. I was an English major, and then I eventually switched and got my degree in journalism. And ultimately, everything that I'm doing now started from sort of, I guess, that epiphany that I had in college of like, I want to tell stories. That's what I want to do, um, you know, with my life. I want to tell other people's stories because there are some fascinating people doing some fascinating things, and they deserve to have their stories told. And so I wanted to do that through journalism. And so after I graduated, I worked at a couple of places. Professionally, I had internships in places, and I really, truly loved it. And journalism for me has always been, the ex that I never fully got over. Uh, I left journalism for a few reasons. Number one, I really wanted to bring more representation to the Latino community in my reporting. I noticed, all growing up that we weren't seen, even though we were doing great things too. We
Mm-hmm.
weren't being represented. And so that was one thing that I wanted to do. And I found that it was actually very difficult for me to do that. And that was really disheartening to me. I felt like I wasn't really making the change in the newsrooms that I wanted to. And so that and journalism just doesn't pay very well. My heart goes out to all the journalists. They're doing incredible work and they're really not being compensated fairly for it. And I really needed a livable wage. So I took my skill set and I actually I went into communications and marketing for nonprofits. And so what I did is when I was a journalist, I noticed that there were stories or press releases, right? Journalists get press releases, like hundreds of press releases a day, and they have to sift through all of that and find something newsworthy. And I noticed that I was not getting any information, any kind of press releases, any heads up from people in the Latino community. And so I decided to in order to make the change and kind of fulfill my personal mission, I would take it and I would make that side loud, and I would be the one that's telling journalists, this is what is newsworthy. And so I did that. I made a change to work for a statewide nonprofit that is run by Latinos. It serves Latinos. It's the largest nonprofit in the state of Idaho that serves Latinos. And I was their communications director for a few years, and I really enjoyed that work. And then I actually stepped into a national organization that did essentially the same thing. And I worked there for a few years. And that led me to where I am now with Planned Parenthood, in doing that and still they still allow me and make a lot of space for me to bring that perspective and strengthen the connection with the Latino community, while also kind of bringing in the other intersections that I'm passionate about: women's rights, LGBTQ rights, Black people's rights, all of those kinds of things. Those are also very embedded in the mission of Planned Parenthood. And so I've been here. I'm actually pretty new in Planned Parenthood still. I just started early this year.
Okay.
So I'm only about 5 months in, but I'm really, really enjoying it. And I do feel like I'm going to be here for a long time.
Rebecca attributes her success to the many mentors she's had along the way, and she stresses how important it is that everyone has access to mentorship.
There's too many people to name individually, but I do remember every single person, and I do remember exactly what they told me and exactly what they did for me at any time. And I'm just truly grateful. And every time I think about it, I get very humbled. And part of my mission too is to be that for somebody else. Every single step and every single chapter, there was somebody, at least one or two people. If in college, in my journey to better mental health, after college, in my first job, in my second job, in my third job, starting my own business. In the podcast wouldn't exist if it weren't for other people. And still to this day, sometimes I have to rely on other people to give me a reality check or even to just pick me up off the ground. And it's constant and it's ongoing. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a mentor. And I think, if I can get off on a quick tangent, I
Sure.
think that is something that is built in for mainstream communities that is not built in for communities of color. And communities of color are often like a step behind because they don't have mentors, because their mentors, they're often pioneers or They don't even honestly understand what a mentor is or why they need one or how to find one. Whereas mainstream, they kind of already have them, like, oh, my uncle was really successful in this, and so he connected me with so and so, and it's just there. And for communities of color, they just don't have that, generationally established, institutionalized ladder to success, or even just like, this is what it looks like to be successful. They don't see, if you're a Black or brown child and you don't see a teacher that is Black or brown, they're all white, it kind of gets into your brain like, oh, well, that's not for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to like fight against everything that you believe in the world in order to be successful sometimes. And a big piece of that is having mentors who will help you, and having a path. So in my podcast, the Latino Card, we often say, you can't be what you can't see. And we're thankfully getting a lot more representation, like in politics, in teaching, in every aspect, STEM fields. You need it everywhere in order for you to think like, hey, maybe I can do this. And it sounds weird to somebody who's used to seeing themselves represented everywhere. But when you don't see that, it becomes a struggle to convince yourself that you're good enough to do that.
Rebecca also has some words of advice on leadership and what it means to be a leader.
This idea of leadership, even though it's such a ubiquitous word and it's so liberally applied to so many different places, and I have struggled a lot with like, what does that even mean, and who's qualified for such a title. I want people to think to themselves, like, what is it that I am putting out into the world? Am I making this world better? Am I making the people around me better? And if you can answer that question with yes, I truly think that that's what I am doing, that I'm leaving a positive mark more than like a net negative. I think you get to call yourself a leader. And that once you become a leader, then you get to lead the charge in whatever it is that you're doing.
Do you have any thoughts about what you might want to do next, or a next big thing that you want to tackle?
I do. So before I had a child, I actually had taken the LSAT, or I was signed up to take the LSAT, and I wanted to go to law school. And I specifically wanted to be an attorney that fights for civil rights. And that's actually a lot of storytelling. When you're an attorney, that's what you do in court. You tell a compelling story, but you also tie the law in, and you tie in a lot of research and analysis. And it's just something that I've been passionate about for a very long time. And that is something that I still plan on doing in the future. Maybe after my kid is old enough to go to school, maybe I need to drop a few passion projects first to free up some time.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I had, as everybody can say, I had a pretty rough period. When I was younger, I wasn't in college. I was waiting tables. I wasn't really making ends meet financially. I was very much on my own. And I struggled a lot, and I didn't really think very highly of myself. I didn't really have a community. And I just didn't really ever see myself being successful one day. And to me, successful was like middle class, because I didn't grow up middle class. And so I just kind of figured, well, this is my lot in life. Not everybody can be on the top. I guess I'll just, I'm not good enough to have a comfortable life. That's for other people. And so sitting where I am now, looking back, it often feels like I wasted a lot of time, because I wasn't, actively pursuing a career or, anything. But there was a lot that I learned in those years of essentially being in a hole and having to like climb my way out of that hole. There was a lot of resilience that I built up, a lot of like mental toughness, a lot of like, don't make excuses, just make it happen. And I think that a lot of that, is kind of, that's not something you can learn in the classroom. That's not even something that you can learn in the workplace necessarily. You can have mentors, but you really have to you really have to look at yourself and decide, like, I need to change, I need to do better, and I need to just get the self-discipline to make it happen. It's not going to come from the outside, it just needs to come from the inside. There were a lot of really hard life lessons that I've learned. But I just kept crawling. I kept going back to school. It took me, I think, 9.5 years to get a bachelor's degree. Because I would try to go, I'd run out of money, I'd have to drop out, get like 3 jobs at a time, go back. I was always working full time when I was in college, and it was rough for a really long time. But it built up this sort of like this ability to keep going. Like, I was already not supposed to be where I am right now. Why not just keep going? Why not shoot for the moon? Why not get a higher degree? Why not get a higher job calling or whatever it is? Like, you're already so much farther than you were supposed to be. And so any advice that I would give to myself is the never stop learning applies outside of a classroom as well, and outside of the workplace too. And also, don't beat yourself up so much.
So-Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SOCALLED for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org. Our theme and transition music was composed by Roberto Cavaco. All other stylings are the sound of my voice. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Subscribe and leave us a review. So-Called is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts.